Hi, everyone. I'm so excited that you could make it today. If you're here, I hope that you're able to stick around for a while. I don't know how long this live stream is going to be, but I'm so excited to be here chatting with all of you, talking about one of my favorite pastimes. Before we get started, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction. I agree, Shai, that Tamando is honestly a lot like a choose your own adventure, although I feel like Tamando is actually a little bit less wacky than a lot of jump chains are, or at least become. But today we're going to be talking about jump chains. Jump chains are a specific type of choose your own adventure. They are very fascinating. And for the last, I want to say, probably 2 years, they have been one of my favorite hobbies. I'm actually a member of several different jump chain communities. Very specifically, I'm active in the one over on Questionable Content, which is a forum for all sorts of stuff, both safe for work and not safe for work. And also the subreddit jump chain community, which is over on Reddit. I really like it. I think it's a lot of fun, and I'm hoping that by the end of this video, you will too. I've actually advertised this video over on one of those spaces, and it's very interesting for me because even though I'm active and I've actually made a jump doc, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, I don't often advertise my videos outside of spaces where it's safe for me to do so. But before we get started, just because there's going to be some new faces here, I am going to say some stuff about myself. My name is Luciano. I create all sorts of content all over the web. I am a physically disabled and chronically ill human being. So if you happen to like the sort of stuff that I create, I hope that you stick around for a while. I hope that you check out my other videos in which I talk about humanism, nerdy things, history, religion, and politics, and also different gaming things. And that you check out my other stuff. I'm a jump chain maker and I'm also a story writer. So odds are, if you happen to like any of the stuff that you see today or that you hear about today, you're going to really like the other sorts of stuff that I make. So I'm going to go ahead and get started right now. I'm going to ask you a question. And I think that it's an important question that will determine how interested or how likely to be interested in jump chains you are. What would you do if you were offered an opportunity to go to fictional places? If you were offered an opportunity to go to Panem, the fictional continent slash community slash state, it's a state, from the Hunger Games, or if you were offered an opportunity to go to Johto, the Pokemon region. If you were offered to go to the Warp, I would hope that you would have the wherewithal to say no, because that is not a safe place. But there's all sorts of fictional communities and fictional settings that I think would be very interesting for a lot of people to go to. And a jump chain effectively allows you to answer the question of what you would do if you were able to go to these settings. I personally would say yes to a lot of them. I think that it's really fun. I would be absolutely delighted if a random omnipotent being had the power to send me to fictional places. And it's because of my answer to that that I think jump chains just really catch my heart. And I think that a lot of people in my community is even not necessarily people who know me for my nerdy things, but also people who know me for my humanism and my history would be interested and would probably say yes to this sort of question. I definitely think that a lot of people would have fun going to different places, and that's effectively what a jump chain allows you to do. Um, yeah, I agree, Adam. I think that that's a very sensible answer. But in addition to this, let's say that this random omnipotent being who could do anything or whatever it wanted. I said anything twice. I'm trying my best, guys. Also had the ability to give you superpowers and knowledge and skills. I think that would make it a lot more sensible for a lot of people to say yes. I know that I would be very delighted to get to go to a place like the Pokemon world if I could catch a Pokemon and I could take it on adventures with me. I also think that I'd be very interested in going to Tamriel if I had the ability to learn magic and I had the ability to take those skills with me and use them in other places. We are going to talk about a lot of different things. But before we get started in today's live stream, at least talking about the really fun stuff, I want to talk a little bit about the history of jump chains. Jumpchains started in the mid 2010s when a 4chan user named Quicksilver posted the very first jump doc, which was named Pokemon Trainer, onto the traditional games image board over on 4chan. I considered putting the link to that particular jump doc in the little description area, and I probably will do that later. But effectively, for a lot of people, the very first jump is also the very first jump that they go on. This is not a hard and fast coded rule of jump chains. Lots of people go to a lot of different places as their first jumps. I personally have a preference for going to a number of different settings, but it's a lot of fun to get to go to Pokemon Trainer. And Pokemon Trainer has a lot of the sort of conventions that we will see even half a decade later, even after half a decade, and almost assuredly tens of thousands of jump docs have been created. I think that there would be lots of different fun places that people could go to for their very first jump. But one thing to keep in mind, especially for your very first jump, is that you're probably going to be there for a minimum of 10 years. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, there's lots of different things that go on when someone first goes to a jump, but I think that that history is just a little bit important. I think it's helpful for people to get to learn that, and I think it helps appreciate that lots of really cool ideas can come from even the most unlikely of places. I know lots of people have fairly strong feelings about 4chan, but the reality is that 4chan, like Reddit, is a website where what you get out of it depends on what you put into it. There's lots of really neat communities on 4chan, just like there are on Reddit, where if you go into them and you only stick in those communities, you're completely fine. You'll have a great experience. I am on Reddit. I love Reddit. I do not go to a lot of different subreddits, and I also don't go to a lot of different image boards on 4chan. I don't even really visit the traditional games one or even the Jump Chain one, which now exists, all that often, just because I think that there's people who know how to explore that website a lot better than me, who can find cool stuff there a lot easier than I can. But I love the Jump Chain subreddit, which is can be found in the description of this video. So if you want to go and visit it for the first time, you definitely can. I am definitely an active member on there, so you'll be seeing a lot of me. I post very long things and also very short things where I help share different jumps from different communities, and also where I talk a long form about the sorts of powers that someone can get from different settings. Two settings that I'm especially fond of that I talk about a whole lot are generic cartoon world and Germanic/Norse mythology jump, both of which are very cool settings that I might talk about in this video, but I'm definitely going to be talking more about jump chains in the future. So even if I don't talk about them in this video, I'll be talking about them in other videos. So that's very exciting. But a jump chain is a type of choose your own adventure. It's associated with a number of different series, most commonly Pokemon, Warhammer, and also a lot of different Nintendo things and Magic the Gathering. It is also associated with both Fantasy Warhammer and Warhammer 40K. And there's lots of different jumps that exist for truly hundreds of different settings. And hundreds is absolutely an understatement. I have seen a list of jumps that had at least 2,000 different jump docs. Now, obviously, not every single one of those jump docs is still working because some of them come from as far back as 2016 or 2017, but that means that there's at least 2,000 separate things that you can get. And if you hear some of these settings and you're a little bit worried about visiting them, or you would be a little bit worried about a character visiting them, which is sensible if you hear something like Magic the Gathering or Warhammer, either of the Warhammers, you should know that there is the ability to buy things before you actually visit the setting, buy abilities, buy items, and lots of other stuff that will prepare you to visit the setting and will make it so that you don't get instantly killed when you visit the setting, or at least the you that is your character. And your character doesn't even necessarily have to be you specifically. That's just a common convention that lots of specific jump chain people, lots of jumpers, and by jumpers I mean like the actual players, decide to do. I have seen people turn fictional characters from Sans from Undertale to Sonic the Hedgehog into jumpers and have had them go on extra planar journeys, and that's really cool That's one of the things that I like about this. That's one of the things that I love about a choose your own adventure, especially a multiversal spanning one like this, where you can get lots of different stuff, and what you get out of it is up to you. Shy is correct. You could be Jonathan Mondragon, which is a world famous surgeon over in the Shiftverse, who is also a superhuman. He is Superman, and I love that for him slash them. That is my character over in Shy's campaign over on their Discord spaces, and we're definitely going to be getting together to talk about that in a live stream in the future. I just want to get more comfortable doing live streams by myself again before I start interviewing people, but I absolutely plan to talk about a lot of different stuff with a lot of different friends. And Tamando and the Shiftverse are some of my favorite topics. And it was actually because of my interest in the Shiftverse and things like this that I got really, really, really into Jumpchains. For a while, Jumpchains were like my only hobby aside from the Shiftverse and from Tamando. And I've seen and I've read hundreds of different jump docs, which are the miniature choose your own adventures that make up the grander choose your own adventure that is a jump chain. And I'm really excited to talk about all of that. So before I dive really into the reads, I want to talk about what it is like in universe for someone to go on a jump chain. Normally, a jump chain would begin with some sort of exchange between what's called a benefactor and the jumper. The benefactor is the Rob, the random omnipotent being slash bastard slash other words that are also not nice that sends the specific jumper on their journey. And it is through their power that a jumper can collect what are called perks, which refer to items, abilities, and traits that will allow them to be not only a survivor of a hellscape world like Earth in the 40th millennium or the 41st millennium or whatever the tagline is for Warhammer 40K. But effectively, yes, Shy is correct that the benefactor is the Shiftverse Council and the jumper is a prime. Effectively, in fact, when I first started learning about jump chains, I actually started talking with Shy for a short while about them because I thought it was funny that someone else had an idea that was very similar. In fact, they are so similar that in the Shiftverse, it's typically like a horde of eldritch beings that are just watching television or the eldritch equivalent of television, and the television is the lives of the prime that is going on in whatever world they happen to be in. And that is often almost exactly what it is for benefactors and for jumpers. Benefactors are often bored beings and they want to see someone on adventures. In fact, in the Pokemon Trainer jump doc, there is actually like an introductory blurb that is the benefactor, the very first benefactor, explaining that they like to send people on adventures. They like to send people from mundane worlds into supernatural worlds. And they're just like, I'm not going to let you die or whatever, at least not super easily. You'll have the ability to spend choice points or CP and purchase items and abilities and skills and knowledge that will help you along your way. But you're going to be going to a different world, and how up to the degree to which your consent matters depends on your benefactor. Some people don't particularly like the benefactor system. I don't particularly like the benefactor system. So in my stories that are based loosely on jump chains, I tend to not include them. But every once in a while, I'll write a prime or I'll write a benefactor. And I think it's kind of interesting. It's an exercise in creativity. And not everyone does their benefactors the exact same. For some people, benefactors are actually jumpers who have completed their jump chain. Um, and they have attained their spark, which in the parlance of the jump chain communities, at least those that are interested in more traditional stuff, the spark is a sort of old walker plain spark from Magic the Gathering, and effectively it grants you a kind of, it puts you on the omnipotent scale and allows you to do effectively anything. Those sorts of sparks can be attained in what are called end jumps, which is the like most common way to end a chain other than death or some other sort of chain failure. But most benefactors, assuming they follow the standard rules that were established by Quicksilver and then ironed out by other jump chain communities over time. Oftentimes, if you die in the jump chain, you will wake up back on Earth and you'll just lose all the stuff that you gained. And as a sort of extra way to be a little nice, your benefactor usually freezes time on the world that you were from, whether it is Earth or some other world, because again, not every single person sends jumpers that are humans from Earth. Some people like to send jumpers that are fictional characters or otherwise powered beings on jump chain journeys. And what they do then really depends on the specific writer, the specific actual player. But yeah, now the chain is the name given to the overall journey. It refers to the collective locations that you've been and the collective location, the collective perks and items you've gotten from the different settings that you visited. And the way, one of the most important terms for someone who's interested in jump chains to remember is the concept of fiat. Fiat refers to the sort of fan wanged way that powers from one setting will continue to work in another setting. So, for example, let's say that you go from Pokemon Trainer to some sort of Star Wars jump. If you go to a Star Wars jump that grants you force sensitivity, which is a considerable number of jumps, but not every single jump that is set in Star Wars, then once you get that, as long as you get it in some sort of perk form, that is effectively backed by your benefactor in such a way that it will continue to work in most other settings. I say most other settings because there are unique jumps, most commonly gauntlets, where all of your powers, no Smitty, we're not talking about the importance of the blockchain. We're talking about jump chains, which is a different kind of chain. And in my opinion, one that is equally important because I'm a physically disabled nerd who really likes to geek out about stuff, and I like to fantasize about having full mobility, which is something that most jumpers have. It's possible to play a disabled jumper if that's what you want to do, but I personally like to fantasize about things that I can't do. Um, but yeah, the way fiat works is largely up to the specific writer, but generally the rules of it say that if you purchase something with choice points in any way, shape, or form, whether it is an item, a companion, or a perk, they will continue to work in other settings. They will have access to their abilities and stuff. So if you go to a Sonic the Hedgehog jump and you get Sonic's super speed, you will be able to use that in other jumps as long as you paid choice points for it. And obviously, not every single setting talks about choice points in the same way. Sometimes they use different abbreviations because the abbreviation that choice points elicits is not the funnest one out of context. Some of them I've seen battle points or war points for different ones. I've seen warp points for one. All of those have different acronyms that can be a little bit more fun to say. And I really like the concept of fiat because it makes it so that the things that you purchase remain important even if you go to different settings, and it makes it so that they stick with you. We're going to talk about different types of jumps in a setting, but we're going to talk about different types of jumps in a second. We will talk about gauntlets in this video. I was not sure how long this little introductory phase would take, so I was excited that we were able to get through it in just about 20 minutes. I'm also excited that so many people are here. This is such a fun topic for me, and I've loved being a part of these different communities so much that I'm excited that I can talk about this and introduce my friends to it. The example that I had in my notes for the concept of fiat backing was actually very interesting. There is a jump for Super Mario 64. And Smitty kind of talked about it a little bit indirectly. But there is a jump document, which are the things that people can read that allow them to see what you can spend your points on and that help you get the foundation for the setting that you're going to be going to. And if you go to the Super Mario 64 one and you take the main character origin, I think it is Plumber in that one, you are able to purchase slash you get for free if you get that specific origin. You are able to purchase Mario's athleticism. That would stick over to whatever other settings you go to. And most perks work regardless of your form at the time, which is also a thing that we're going to get to in a second. And that means that you could be Sonic and you could have the athleticism of both Mario and the speed of Sonic. You probably wouldn't be Sonic directly unless you took like a main character replacement thing, but you could be another hedgehog that is also super fast. And also, I really like seeing all the different video games and franchises that people are mentioning because there's lots of different jump documents, and there is a jump document for Kirby. There's literally dozens of them for the different Kirby games that exist. There's the ones for Kirby 64, there's ones for Kirby Star Allies. Um, all sorts of stuff. And I think that that's really neat because almost any setting that you can imagine that is fairly popular has a jump dock or more than one for it. There are dozens of jump docks for Type Moon, which is a video game series. There's dozens of jump docks for Mario and for The Legend of Zelda. And you can find all sorts of stuff in those jump docks. You could find the Triforce in a lot of different Legend of Zelda jump docks, but usually purchasing it requires a lot of points from a lot of different origins. So you wouldn't be able to get it unless you took drawbacks, which we'll talk about later. You could get the Warp Star from Kirby. You could get mushrooms and warp pipes from Mario. I think that that's really cool, and I think that that's super exciting. I think that the idea that people could go and purchase those kinds of things, and then they could have them, and that they would work in other settings is so awesome. Hey, Lined, I'm so excited to see you. I don't know if you are someone from the Reddit, but if you are, that's super nice. I'm so happy that you friends are joining us. I'm talking about this way because I fully plan to talk about specific jump docks in the future. And in this specific video, we're not going to be delving super deep into specific jump docks, but I have plans to talk about them and to show them to all of you in the future. But the different ways that jump docks work, there are effectively three different stages in the different jump docks slash the different jumps that a person will go to. If someone wants to go to the jump for Super Mario 64, which is a standard jump that was written that people can find online, although if anyone has any questions and wants to see it, they can message me somewhere and I can share them the documents. I could also share them the folders that have it because the different communities have different jump drives over on Google Docs that people can find. All of these things are public, they're super accessible. It's just a matter of having the knowledge and being in the communities and being able to access them. Also, in case I didn't mention it, the different communities that people can find where jump doc stuff and jumps are talked about and shared. The two most prominent ones that I know of are the Reddit slash subreddit and the one over on 4chan. Both of those are very popular, very prominent spaces, but there's also one on space battles and questionable questing. Questionable questing is where you get the not safe for work ones, not safe for work ones, which include different not safe for work parodies of different franchises, fan fictions of different popular series. Like there's Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, not safe for work jump doc that is based off of a fairly popular not safe for work fanfic. And of course, there's lots of different safe for work stuff that you can find, but you can find stuff for all of your different interests. There's also jump docs for generic settings, which are often based off of like real life things. There's a generic legal drama one, there's a generic medical drama one. There is just a generic modern Earth, which is just you get to go to Earth for a decade. It's kind of not your Earth, but it's definitely close enough that you can recognize it and you could just be a normal person for a decade. But there's also lots of different settings you could go to where you can be a normal person anyway. I'm pretty sure that there's a How to Get Away with Murder jump doc, which is just a very popular legal drama. And people can go to that setting. They could be lawyers for a little bit, or they can be law students for a little bit and then become lawyers and have fiat backed legal abilities. The medical drama one is fun because you can become a doctor and you can have medical credentials that will carry over into whatever other setting you go to. And I think that that's really neat. But once someone decides that they want to start a jump chain, which is the broad term, the way that they think about this is they start off thinking about their jumper, which for a lot of people is just a self insert. I think that a self insert is a very easy way to go about it. You just think about what you would do in those sorts of situations. I have actually never done a self insert before, but I've thought about doing a self insert. I think as a disabled person, it would be kind of fun because no matter where I go, I would be healed of my disability and I'd be able to do a lot of the stuff I can't do as a disabled person. Smitty, I've never seen a not safe for work Kirby one. Now that throws me for a loop. Although it's kind of weird that there's not a not safe for work Kirby one. But once you are thinking about your first jumper, if you want to go with the self insert route, you think about the way that all of this starts. You don't necessarily have to have a benefactor, although that's definitely the easiest way to explain all of the different contrivances that come with different jump docs, like the ability to take on different alt forms and the ability to gain instant knowledge of languages as well as fiat backing. It's absolutely the easiest way to do this. It's just that some people don't really want to do it that way. And if you don't really want to do it that way, there's actually material that exists. There are supplements that exist that will allow you to go on jump chains without benefactors that offer unique abilities and unique ways of handling multiversal travel and all that kind of stuff. So people have definitely thought about it. It's just that this is the standard, and I think it's easiest for me to focus this video if I talk about the standard. I think that that's a really neat way of going about it. So you think about your jumper, you decide how you're going to deal with your benefactor. For example, there is a fairly popular in the jump chain community, broadly speaking, fan fiction of someone named SJ, whose deal with her benefactor is that it's a job for her. And in the very first post over on her WordPress, she is saying, like, the very first chapter in which she goes to the generic Pokemon trainer one, which is the standard first jump for people who hopped in now but missed the very beginning. She was looking for a job, and a friend sent her. I'm paraphrasing here, so I might be getting like some facts wrong. But the way that that one works is it's a job for her. She gets a link to apply. She does the application, and then her omnipotent benefactor is like, "Hey, I have a job offer for you. You're just gonna go to different settings. You're gonna live in them for a decade." And every single one of her posts is going to be, for the most part, especially in the beginning, every single one of her posts is a summary of the events that happened in the jump that she lived in. Some of the ones that I can remember off the top of my head, she starts off in generic Pokemon trainer. That's not the actual name of it. It doesn't have the word generic in front of it, which has implications in jump chain communities. But she starts off in Pokemon trainer as the standard first one. She leaves there, and then I think she goes to Infamous, but I might be wrong. But she's also visited the Elder Scrolls, which has 1,000 different jumps, just like Fallout has a bunch of different jumps. And she's also gone to a version of Harry Potter. I can't remember which version of Harry Potter she went to, but lots of different people like the different Harry Potter jump docs that exist. There's a fairly new one, which is really, really, really good, called the Wizarding World. And that one is all about the movies, but it also includes Hogwarts Legacy stuff. And obviously, I know that lots of people don't like J.K. Rowling. I don't like J.K. Rowling, but like that is a very, very popular franchise. Any space like this is going to have at least some Harry Potter stuff. And it is very interesting to get to go visit those settings. And Shai brings up an important point about the 10-year thing. For lots of people, 10 years feels like a lot, but once you've hit a certain level of power and once you've hit a certain level of influence, which is very easy to do in jump chains snowball really fast just by nature of how they work. 10 years is really not that much. There's different perks and also different drawbacks that someone can take that alter the length of time that they spend in a setting. Some settings being stuck there for 10 years is definitely very weird and not very weird in a fun way. An example that I can think of this is Encanto, which is a story that takes place over the course of, I want to say, like 3.5 days. Multiple different settings have perks or drawbacks that allow you to leave the second that you finish the storyline if you want to, as well as stay for even longer than 10 years if you want to. And of course, because this is a single player experience, you can decide how stuff works. If you want to stay for more than 10 years, you absolutely can. I think that, like, I think that there's lots of different ways that people can handle that. The very first Jump Chain story I ever wrote had a character that was in the world of Chronicle, the 2012 movie by Max Landis, where a bunch of teenagers get telekinesis. The jump chain for that story is phenomenal. I really, 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 really like the jump doc for that story. You get telekinesis for free, and then there's different origins based off of each of the main characters. And with the ways that those work, you get discounts off of the perks that you would be purchasing as long as they're in line with your origin. So if you wanted to be Andrew, who was the main antagonist, or if you wanted to be like Andrew, who was the main antagonist, you would get perks that are related to like your emotions and your skills with your superpower and just a bunch of really cool stuff. That character only stayed in that setting for not even a year. He only stayed for like almost half a semester before he went to the very next setting for him. And I have since stopped writing that story, but it is possible to find it on Questionable Questing. And I also think that I'm pretty sure that I posted it somewhere else, but I can't remember exactly where. But that was a story that had a bunch of different settings and had a bunch of different characters. And that was because I mixed it. Because Chronicle is not a setting that is super fun to stay in for a decade. You certainly can, but even if you take material from the unreleased second movie, which a script is available of online, there's only so much you can do in it other than master your powers and live a mundane life. Because even the source of the powers is not an active danger unless you go out of your way to like aggravate it or to engage with it, or you take a drawback that guarantees its engagement. And a drawback, I've mentioned this before, but a drawback is a sort of challenge that increases how many points you have. So if you take it, you can buy more things. It's their way of balancing just different stuff that exists within jump chains, and also making it so that if there's a jump dock that has a whole bunch of stuff and you want to buy more than 1,000 points would get you, you have a way of doing that. But yeah. So once you enter a jump setting, the first thing you do is you decide your build. The ways that different people handle this is going to be up to them. Some people don't really like the gamey aspects of this, which I think is super fair. I personally kind of like some of the gamey aspects of it because, in the eyes of your benefactor, it is just a game, just like in the way that it's TV for someone who is watching. So if you want to, you can write out the thing of you selecting the perks that you have. Perks, in case you missed that part of it, are abilities, skills, and traits that you can purchase that will make it so that you can get more used to your powers, so that you can have more powers, and a bunch of different cool stuff. Related to perks are origins, which are basically your background. And every time you insert into a jump, you are going to get a whole new set of memories, unless you take what are known as the drop in options as your origins. And drop ins just plop you into the world with no new memories, no new stuff. You just get them, you get your perks, you get your items, and then you're free to do whatever you want for a decade. But when you are doing the build stage of a jump, you are able to select which perks you want to buy. You're able to select what drawbacks you want to take. You're able to select what items you get. And items are very, very important, especially very early on. Items are things that are listed in the jump doc as related to perks and as related to superpowers, which are sometimes a different section. And also, I'm going to go ahead and take a drink of water because I've been talking nonstop for a while. Remember to stay hydrated. And with items, I think that items are very fascinating. I think that items, especially very early on, matter probably more than perks do. An item has a number of different properties in the context of a jump chain, specifically if you buy one using your points. If you buy one using your points, there's a certain number of protections that are guaranteed that differ from item to item, but effectively, even if you lose it or it's stolen or it's destroyed, you will get it again in some way, shape, or form. At the very latest, at the end of this jump and the beginning of your next jump, the item will be restored to you in some way. So if you get a lightsaber that is fiat backed, which is certainly a possibility, numerous different Star Wars jump docks offer lightsabers for free. I was doing research and I was looking up specific examples, and there is a jump doc based off of the Darth Plagueis novel by James Lucan. I probably mispronounced that name, which is fiat backed and it's free. So if you get it and it's destroyed at the end of this jump and you make it to the next jump, you will get a new lightsaber. It's not super advanced, it's not super fancy, it's just a standard lightsaber, but it's free. And lightsabers are phenomenal weapons across a hilarious breadth of settings. And fiat backing also means the item is guaranteed to work the way that it's supposed to in any setting, so long as you aren't in like a gauntlet or something, or assuming you don't take a drawback that depowers your items and takes away your cool stuff. But another item from that specific jump dock is 501 Republica, and 501 Republica is an apartment. 500 Republica is actually a very luxurious apartment tower in Coruscant in the Star Wars mythos, and it is where numerous politicians live. But in the jump dock, you can get it for free if you decide to be, I'm pretty sure it is the Palpatine origin, where you are a student of the Sith. You get it for free because it costs 100 points, and anything that costs 100 points and is discounted is free to you. At least most of the time. There are exceptions, and there's some sticklers who say, oh, you only pay 50 points instead of 100. But yeah, most of the time, if something costs 100 and you can discount it, you get it for free. And in that case, the way that I've always interpreted that is that in that specific jump, you have fiat-backed access to a very cool apartment where you are guaranteed some maximum safety. Assassins can still try to kill you in the apartment and stuff, but it's a cool home base for you to operate out of. And in the future, if you go to another setting that is not Star Wars, but is, say, New York City, you get access to a super cool apartment building and penthouse suite in New York City that you don't have to pay for, that you don't have to maintain. It's just there for you to use as a home base. Because the whole idea with points is that if you invest them, they operate across jumps as long as you've not been depowered in some way. So if you take it and you go to generic creepypasta, which is another real jump that is very fun, that is by, I believe generic creepypasta is by Pokebrat J, who is a popular jump creator over on the Reddit community, then you will be able to have a fancy apartment in wherever you are. And I think that's really cool. Generic creepypasta also lets you be creepy monsters. It's one of my favorite jumps. It's not super powerful. It's not super dangerous. It's just a world where like the stories of creepypasta are actually real things. There's actual monsters that exist that can find you and that can interact with you. They don't necessarily have to be your enemy, but they probably won't be your ally unless you have perks that make you really cool at hanging out with monsters and evil people or something, because I don't know, most of them are evil for some reason and they want to do you harm. But yeah, once you have decided the build that you have and you finalize it, you are dropped into your starting location. A jump dock will have a number of different things. One of the things that most will have is some sort of starting location. Using the Darth Plagueis jump that I mentioned before, one of the starting locations, if I remember correctly, was Coruscant. I actually have it pulled up, so I'm going to make sure. Yeah, one of the starting locations that you could get was Coruscant. Another that I can pronounce is Naboo, and then there's Kamino and Dathomir. There's some names here that I can't pronounce. You can find this jump for free. It's super easy. None of the jumps are paywalled. You just have to know where to search. And the way that selecting your starting location works differs from jump to jump. In some jumps, your location is determined by your origin/background, and in other ones, it is up to random chance. You're supposed to roll a dice, and then the number that you roll on is where you get. And in others, you can pay to select, and in some cases, you just select them for free. You just decide where you want to start. But once you have done the build, you are dropped into the place. You'll live there for however long you're supposed to live there. For most jumps, it's a decade, but there are some jumps where it's actually just by default longer than that. And that's super fun. In some cases, I've seen jumps where you are there for a century. I have actually written a jump where there's different toggles, so there's different ways that you could play it. But if you do it the way that it is supposed to be done based off of the source material, you only stay there for 2 years before you go to the next one. But you can also stay there for the full 10 if you want. It is a jump called Welcome to Vaporwave City. You can find it on the subreddit, and it is based off of a choose your own adventure of the same name. Um, Making jumps based off of choose your own adventures is kind of rare, but I really liked it. I really like vaporwave aesthetic, and I just really liked the vibes of that choose your own adventure, so it inspired me to make a jump doc. Lots of people really like it. There's people who use it as a sort of safe starting jump because there's lots of different perks, some of which are supernatural, but most of which are just, hey, you're better at doing a little bit of cool stuff. In one case, you're better at delivering pizza and you can speak Spanish fluently. And those perks are silly, but the setting is silly. So it's not supposed to be like super serious or whatever. And Smitty, yeah, it reminds a lot of people of Magic Tree House. That's a comparison that lots of different jump people have mentioned before. I think one of the biggest ideas that reminds a lot of people of the Magic Tree House is the idea that like time is frozen, and that is so neat to me. I really like the idea that like you can go for a 1,000-year journey and then you could come back to Earth, powered or not powered, with your spark or without it, and you can just chill on Earth and have your stuff, and it'll be like only a few minutes have passed, or it'll be like even less time has passed. I think that that's super cool to a lot of people. There actually is a way for the curious that you actually can go to Earth between jumps if that's what you're into. If you think your jumper would really miss Earth or their homeworld, there is a thing called the personal reality supplement, which relates to the concept of the cosmic warehouse. And if you invest in the personal reality supplement enough points, you have the ability to choose to go back to your home reality between jumps. I think at most you can stay either up to a month or 2 weeks to be there, and you'll get to be on Earth. I don't remember what it says about your powers and how they work, but I think that that's such a very cool concept. The idea behind the personal reality supplement is that every jumper, when they do their first jump, they also get two other things. They get what's called a body mod, which is like their base human body, but enhanced in different ways. They can get supernatural abilities, they can get super strong, they can get super smart, and this will stick with them no matter where they go. If they go to a gauntlet, they're still able to use at least some components of their body mod. And there's also the concept of the cosmic warehouse. The basic idea there is that since you're going to be going on a multiversal or even omniversal journey, you're going to be collecting a lot of stuff naturally over time. So your benefactor is like, hey, I'm going to give you the space where you can have a space to rest and you can have all of your cool stuff in there. And your cool stuff will, for the most part, work the way that it's intended, even if outside of it, it is not necessarily fiat backed. Some people have reacted to the concept of the cosmic warehouse by creating what's called the personal reality supplements, which is a very popular sort of exchange where instead of getting the warehouse, you get a personal reality, which has all of the functions of the warehouse and is a pocket dimension that you can invest points in and you can build up over time as a sort of constant between jumps that also sticks with you. There's cool stuff that you could do with it. You can have a spa, you could have a place for all your homies or for all your honeys if that's what you're into. Harem perks are truly a dime a dozen, and even the safe for work jump chain spaces. So there's lots of different ways that you can engage with that I think are really fun. Um, yeah. And I think it's very cool to talk about all this kind of stuff because this is like the way for a lot of people to fantasize about like what it would be like if Luffy from One Piece went to DC or whatever and Luffy retained the devil fruit powers somehow that he has and he wanted to try and fight Batman or something. And obviously this doesn't work one to one for a lot of these sorts of things because there's lots of rules that fiat backing kind of break about the ways different multiverses and different settings work. But this is just a really fun thought exercise for a lot of people. Yeah. Oh, I did not realize that Personal Reality was by SJ. I mentioned SJ before. She is a writer. She is a very popular member of the broader Jump Chain community, and she was the person who had the story that I was talking about earlier. She is also like me and like multiple other people who write Jump Chain stories. a creator of jump chain things that are not just stories. The main things that I have created are stories, but I'm working on a generic backrooms jump right now that I really, really like. I'm the creator of the Welcome to Vaporwave City one. I also have a Little King story one, which is a video game from the late 2000s that I really liked that I never finished. I struggled with getting it like all the way there. But if you really like the back rooms and you really like the idea of like a multiversal explorer going into the back rooms and just sort of dicking around, I'm creating a jump chain that is based on that idea where people will be able to purchase all sorts of cool stuff from the back rooms. And what that is an unfortunate association. SJ, the jump chain person, does not deserve the association with SJ Thompson. SJ Thompson, damn. Because my life intersects so many different spaces, a lot of people don't get that. SJ Thompson is a Christian, I think Catholic blogger who is just a frustrating human being. And she is well known in spaces that talk about like religion and stuff. And she's actually, like, as far as I can tell, a nice human being on a one-to-one level, but I hate her views. Her views are very unfortunate. Um, Lots of different stuff to talk about that I still want to get to. Once you've hit a decade, assuming you haven't died, or once you've hit however long your jump is supposed to last, you have three options that will be presented to you. You have the ability to stay in the world and make it your permanent home world, if that's where you want to be, your permanent home setting. You have the ability to return to your native reality, typically Earth, or you have the ability to keep on jumping. I think most people know what the basic assumption is going to be. Most people are going to keep on jumping. That is, of course, assuming that you haven't done an end jump where you get your spark. End jumps have unique challenges, and the challenges will culminate with either you completing the jump but not sparking, you chain failing in some way, which sends you back home, no powers or nothing most of the time, or you getting your spark. And if you get your spark, then you can just sort of do whatever you want. Not that many people have done things on post spark content, but some people say that you can just sort of continue jumping. You just won't be doing like the jump docs anymore. But effectively, you can go to settings you haven't visited. You can go to settings you want to visit but have been scared to, all that kind of stuff. And now I'll take a second to talk about the different types of jumps. Typically, the most common types of jumps that people will see, and if I'm talking fast, it's worth noting that there's like so many different thoughts in my head. I do these live streams to just sort of talk at and with people, and I'm thinking that there's going to be lots of valuable information that people who are not in the community are going to be able to gain from this. If I talk about specific jump docs, I will be doing like future streams on them and stuff, and I will be like talking about their specific cool stuff and what I like and what I don't like from them. So don't worry if it seems like I'm talking super fast. I'm just having fun. I'm able to do so much of this without looking at notes because I have spent truly so much of my life in this community. And I think that that's fun. It makes it so that I can easily talk about this for like hours on end with no real issues. But typically, a jump will be based off of a fictional setting. It'll be based off of a video game. It'll be based off of a TV show like The Owl House, or a TV franchise like Avatar: The Last Airbender, slash Avatar generally, or it'll be based off of something generic. With generic stuff, there's a lot more freedom to do different kinds of things. There's lots of generic stuff that is just generic Earth, where you go to a normal, other than you world where there's no supernatural stuff, and you just hang out for a decade. One of my favorite first jumps is actually generic cubicle, which is a I can't believe I'm gonna talk about this, but it is a jump where for a decade you have an office job. And I know it sounds weird, but there's lots of really cool stuff in it. There's perks that make it so that you're able to just talk to people super easily, which is great for someone with social anxiety. Like I have social anxiety. I know that it's incredibly difficult to tell because I'm out here doing this, but every single time I live stream, I just have to like tell myself that I'm going to get in front of my camera and I'm just going to spiel. I'm just gonna nerd out for like an hour or something, and it terrifies the inside of me. But in generic cubicle, there's a bunch of different origins. One of them is the like call center origin, where you just work at a call center in some capacity for a decade. And I know that for a lot of people, that sounds like a living hell, but there's lots of really cool perks there. One of the capstone perks, which is the term for the most expensive perks in a set origin, which is a set of perks that are discounted by having that origin, is the ability to develop a psychological profile based off of talking to people. So if you and I were to have a conversation that lasted for 3 hours, over the course of that 3 hours, I would start to know things about you to the point of being able to supernaturally intuit things about you, like your mental health, triggers for you, all that kind of stuff. And that is a fantastic perk. I think that that is such a cool perk. And it actually talks about if you talk to someone for long enough, this thing will actually update even when you are not talking to them. But of course, you have to keep on talking to them over time for it to stay accurate and stuff. So it is a supernatural ability. It's just like a supernatural ability that is fairly minor, but is still pretty cool in some way that could help you out a lot. If you wanted to take that and then you wanted to go interact in a setting that is filled with political intrigue like Star Wars, you could use it and then you could talk to Palpatine and you would be able to develop a sort of like knowledge of him that you may not have, even if you like didn't read the books or whatever. That would be really cool for you and it could be really helpful. That setting I know it sounds really boring, but it's actually like filled with fun perks and it's filled with lots of really cool items. And one of the really big items is actually free. It is a salary item that follows you. But the way that it works is the reason it's free is that it's not a salary item that gives you money automatically while you're in the jump. It's free because it starts to activate when you leave the jump and you go to your next setting. And the way that it works is that it takes the amount of money that you would get a year and pays you that money forever, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that is incredibly useful. So the basic way that it works is once you leave the jump, your pay is calculated and it is stored in effectively a permanent sort of bank that will, at regular intervals, give you the amount of money that you should be getting. If you got paid monthly, every month you would get the money that you would be getting from your job if you would continue to work it. And if that doesn't sound really powerful, it's worth noting that if you take this as a first jump, you could go anywhere else after this and you would continue to get that money. So you could take this and then you could go to Westeros. If you got a job that paid you $1 million a year somehow, you would get that $1 million in Westerosi currency. I don't remember the name of the fucking coins from Game of Thrones. Sorry, I'm a nerd, but I can't remember like everything. But it would pay you that over the course of the time that you're in Westeros, and it would continue paying that. So if you got paid monthly, every month in your warehouse, you would get the equivalents. It could be in dollars or in pesos or whatever you got paid in on Earth, or you could just natively transfer it and it would become the local currency. So that is really, really, really cool. It's a very handy item. One of my favorite things to think about is I'm kind of boring, so I'll be honest about that. I like to imagine if someone wanted to stay human and have as normal a jump chain experience as possible, as mundane and as unsupernatural as they possibly could forever. I like to think about like things that would really help with that. And that item would be fantastic because if you go from this jump, then you would be able to just not work if that was your first jump. And by the end, you had a job that was paying you like 70 something $1,000 a year. Or if you were even better, if you were built different and you got like 100 grand a year, you would be able to get that forever. And I think that's really, really neat. Galleons is actually the currency in Harry Potter. That it's the currency in the magical section of the Wizarding World. I was a huge Harry Potter nerd as a kid. I I unironically really loved those books. I thought they were really neat. So I know lots of little things like that. At least I think it's Galleons. I'm pretty sure it's Galleons. I might be wrong. Um, if you take that, that's really cool. If you go to generic cartoon world, which is a world that is built on toon logic and has humans and toons interacting Who Framed Roger Rabbit style, you would be able to buy a series of theme parks that follow you around. Now, the thing with that is that they are worth 800 points, which is almost the entire budget that you get in that specific jump. Every jump gives you a different number, but the standard is 1,000 of whatever currency, um, whatever currency you're in. But 1,000 is the standard, or some multiple of 1,000. There is a type moon slash fate thing where it's actually 1,000,000. It's the type moon thing that's like a parody of Star Wars. That one is, I believe that's one of the only Fate jumps I've seen that is not by Valeria, but I might be wrong. Valeria is a very prominent creator who created some of the best jumps that I've ever seen. Valeria created a DC Cinematic Universe jump. Valeria created the Fate Legends series. Fate Legends refers to the type moon universe, but in like its historical and geographic areas. There's one for Japan, there's one for France, there's one for Britain, there's one for the Americas, there's one for just a whole bunch of different places. And in that one, in the DC one that Valeria made, you can become Superman, but without becoming Superman. So you can just become a Kryptonian, but like a DC Cinematic Universe Kryptonian. Cinematic Universe might be the wrong one. I'm thinking of the live action, and I don't pay enough attention to the DC live action movies to know. It might be the DC Extended Universe. That might be what it's called, but it's something like that. And if you go to generic Cartoon World and you get the theme park item, which is worth going to generic Cartoon World for, you get a chain of amusement parks that follow you along the rest of your chain. And these amusement parks are better than amusement parks in the real world. They are better than Disney, and they're always going to be profitable, and you can live in them if you want. It's actually kind of ridiculous how good they are, which I guess makes sense since they're worth 800 points. But you get 15 that you can place in wherever you want in the setting to place. And there's actually a perk from the Germanic Norse mythology jump that allows you to triple the number of items that you get. And I love that perk. And I love the idea of fusing it with the theme park item, because that means that you would get 45 theme parks to place just wherever you want. And you can live in the theme parks. You can do whatever you want in the theme parks, which is really cool because the very central nature of jumps is that you have to go and you have to live there for a decade, and at least for the most part. And if you're going to be in a place in a decade, there's lots of settings that are absolutely worth visiting that are going to be boring if you stay there for even a year. If you go to Chronicle, where you can get telekinesis for free, it's absolutely worth going. It's absolutely worth going very early on just so you can get psychic powers, which are always going to be helpful. Telekinesis is one of those utility superpowers that is just, it's worth getting. Like pretty much no matter what you want to do, no matter what you want to be, if you have the ability to get telekinesis, you should get telekinesis. But if you get it and then you're just stuck there for a decade, it's going to be boring. So if you have items, a lot of items can help alleviate that boredom, which I think is really important, especially if you're trying to think about like what it would be like for a jumper. Especially because lots of normal people would not start off with these ambitions to become cosmic gods. They would want to go on these journeys and they would want to go to fun settings and they'd want to hang out. And over the course of time, their powers would snowball, because that is the really big thing with these sorts of like choose your own adventures. Even if you start off as the most normal person, once you've done your like fourth or fifth jump, even if you're trying to keep things as mundane as possible, you're probably going to have some off the wall abilities. Unless you are going out of your way to stick to mundane, non supernatural worlds, you are going to develop superpowers and you're going to have all sorts of stuff. And Smitty is correct that Danny Phantom has incredibly useful abilities. The Danny Phantom jump dock is fantastic as an early jump. If you become a ghost or a half ghost, you get things like possession and flight for free, which are just god tier superpowers to get for free. Just really, really good stuff to get for free. But over the course of time, your characters are going to snowball. I think it's entirely possible that even going to 3 or 4 jumps could make you an immortal eldritch being without that much difficulty. So it is important for you to develop a jumper that has like a personality and has a clear set of goals and a way that they like to engage with the different settings that they're in. And I think that one of the funnest ways to go about doing something like that would be to have interesting items. And lots of settings have really, really cool items. For example, I talk about the Germanic Norse mythology jump a whole lot. That specific jump has some really cool items. One of the funnest items is just a sort of quality of life thing is the ring Dropnir, which is in the actual mythology a ring that Odin has that lets you that like multiplies itself, and it's a ring made of gold. In the jump dock that has it, it is a free item if you take the right origin. And what it does is every 9 days, it will allow you to create 8 more rings that you can sell. And it doesn't even have to be of gold. You can make it of any real world metal that I think is really, really cool. And I think that that's all sorts of super fun. I think that that's the sort of thing that if I were a mundane person, I think I would want to get, because if these rings go for even $50, if that's the highest price you can get for a ring like that, and it isn't, then you would be able to sell 8 of them and you would be able to get $400. Super easy. And $400 is almost my entire rent, and that's every 9 days. I would be overjoyed if I had that sort of thing, because then I would be able to just sort of create content full time. I am a disabled person. Working regular jobs is a little bit difficult for me just because I'm physically disabled. I can't walk or stand for long periods of time, and that makes doing most in-person jobs just sort of out of reach for me. But if I had an item like that, I would be able to do all sorts of cool stuff. I'd just be able to go to a store and sell my rings every week or so, and then I'd be able to pay my rents, and I'd have enough that I could just do things. I could just travel and go places, and I could do that for a decade. Unfortunately, that jump is hilariously cosmically dangerous because it is a fairly lore accurate representation of Norse mythology, which is cosmic in scale. It is a very, very powerful mythology. I would not recommend going there unless you're doing creative mode, which is a different type of play that some people can do where you don't have points, or you're doing what I would do, which is called the quest system. I'm working on the quest system, and the quest system is a method of play where you actually don't get points at all. And instead, when you first enter a jump, you select an origin, you get all of the origins, perks, and items, and then you can unlock more stuff by interfacing with the world and engaging with it. So if someone were to want to do the quest style and they wanted to go to the Darth Plagueis jump, they would select one of the 2 origins, they would get all of the origin stuff, and then they would have to interact with the world in ways that are appropriate to the origin they want to unlock. And over time, they would unlock the rest of the perks and the items. And I think that's really fun. I personally don't like the math heavy aspects of choose your own adventures. So I think that that's really cool. I think it's fun to come up with alternate ways that are not creative mode, which is just you can get anything you want and you can get as much of it as you want. That is super wish fulfillment. And while I like my jump chains to be wish fulfillment, I still like for there to be adventure and stuff. Thank you, Lined Office. I actually do have posts where I've talked about it before. So if you are on the subreddit and you see stuff by Sin God, that's me. The reason for my names, I got asked about it, not on Jump Chain, but in like a different community, is that I'm an atheist and I used to run a blog named Sin God. When I was younger, atheism was an active part of my career, and that was really cool. I'm not going to say anything mean about religion in this stream because that's not what the stream's about. That's just me talking about like my real life backstory. But yeah, I really like the quest system. I think it's better than the like budget system where you have to do a whole bunch of math. But I understand why some people like the budget system. Not everyone loves the wish fulfillment aspects of jump chains, especially if you have unlimited things that you can go out and do, and you could theoretically get everything from a jump, because getting everything from even one jump really dramatically compounds your power. But yeah, I think that that's just a different way of playing. I was talking about different types of settings. Also, bye, Smitty. Thanks for coming here. We're going to be doing more live streams in the future. But yeah, if you've liked my live streams, definitely subscribe, especially if you're new here. I fully plan to do live streams where I talk about specific jumps. But typically speaking, there are mostly two different types of jumps. There's the standard jumps, which are based off of fictional franchises or generic ideas, and then there are gauntlets. There's other types of special jumps, but gauntlets are the most common. And in gauntlets, you are fully depowered, you don't have access to your items. You also have a budget of 0, and with gauntlets, you have to take drawbacks in order to get points, and that makes it more difficult for you to be in the setting. And then you are able to purchase things that will work with you in this jump, and they will stick with you later. Um, an example of a gauntlet off the top of my head is Love is a Dungeon, which is actually not a not safe for work one despite its name. It's a generic fantasy adventure gauntlet where you are a hero or a knight who is supposed to go into a tower and you're supposed to help rescue princesses. And the way that it works is you start off either right outside of the tower or you start off really far away from the tower. And once you get into the tower, you're able to make the choices, you're able to buy the stuff, and you're also able to take the drawbacks that will make it harder for you to rescue the princesses. At the end of the jump, you have a confrontation with the kidnapper. And then, regardless, as long as you don't die or otherwise chain fail, you have the option to experience a decade in the setting, or you can go on to your next setting with all the stuff that you've gotten, including the people that you've rescued, if that's what you want to do. It's a very fun, just generic fantasy setting. It's not based off of anything to my knowledge, and it is 100 something pages long. I think it's like 111. It has a whole bunch of different princesses. It's actually way more than 111. It might be like 130 something. That's probably more accurate. And it's just a really fun setting. Because it's a gauntlet, you could go there as your first jump. You wouldn't be losing any stuff that you, since you don't already have perks and stuff. And I think that it's actually kind of fun to do gauntlets as your first jump, especially because lots of gauntlets have unique timelines. You won't necessarily be in a gauntlet for a year. Love is a dungeon. Is it Love is a Dungeon? It might be Love is a Battlefield, but it's something like that. I'll probably come in back in the comments and post the actual correct name when I'm done with the stream. But that one is unique in that once you have done the gauntlet stuff, you can actually regain all your powers and all your stuff, and you can be there for the full decade if you want. So if you were an eldritch god being who has completed 1,000 jumps and you just wanted like a challenge for a second, you could do the challenge, you could rescue the princesses, and then you could explore the world with your full powers. It's just a really fun time. Some different settings also have different rules. There are some jumps that are continuous jumps, but those are very rare. You are theoretically supposed to you're theoretically supposed to be able to do jumps in any order that you want, but some jumps are linked in such a way that you are supposed to take them in a specific order. Shy is correct. It's effectively the safe for work version of Tower Girls slash Princess and Conquest. And that's almost certainly what it's at least partially inspired by, but I actually have never seen confirmation one way or another. It just feels like it. It follows a very similar format. And it's really neat to try and do gauntlets. Some jumps can actually, oh, is that true? Oh, that's really neat, Grims. Thank you for telling me that. Also, I don't recognize your name from before, so if you are a Reddit person, I hope you're having a good time and you're just talking and you're just listening to me nerd out for a second. Um, Very cool that you're here. If you are someone I know and you just changed your name, that's also super cool, and I apologize. My memory isn't always the best. I'm normally only good at remembering nerd shit, which is part of the reason why I've been able to do this so easily. I actually have a health condition that makes it difficult for me to talk for long periods of time, which is very funny given the overall context. If I've been on the stream by myself for an hour talking almost nonstop, but I will be feeling this tomorrow, which kind of sucks because I have a D&D campaign tomorrow, D&D session. But yeah, lots of different settings. I know that's one of the generic gauntlets I've seen. I haven't really seen that many generic gauntlets. I think that another very interesting gauntlet is for Plague Inc., which is that like pandemic simulator game that was all the rage right before COVID and right after COVID. I really hope that it came out before COVID because I definitely remember seeing people play it. That one is also a gauntlets, which I think is very interesting. And I really like it. Some gauntlets are also really good for stories. I think that gauntlets make better story settings than most jump chains. One of the big things I've struggled with as a writer of jump chain stories is that it's difficult for me to progress time fast. Anyone who's read my works know that like one of my areas where I most struggle as a writer is the advancement of time. I don't like being stuck in a place for a decade. That is one of the reasons why I have a minor preference for the essence meta, choose your own adventure over jumps. But I think the jumps are more fun because I like the idea of like going to Storybrooke from Once Upon a Time and interacting with like Rumpelstiltskin and Emma and Zelina and Regina. And I also really like the idea of going to Sleepy Hollow and also the Jump Sleepy Hollow because that's the name of the town where I can interact with Ichabod Crane and the Mills family. I believe that that's what they're called, Abby Mills and her sister. But like it's difficult to do that in a fun way, at least for me, with the essence meta, whereas with jump chains, it's very easy for me to do that in a fun way. I feel like jump chains are structured in such a way that like you get more of an appreciation for a setting based off of the jump chain community than you would if you just got an essence from the essence meta, which is another choose your own adventure thing that I will be doing a live stream about, where if you drink a potion, you get a superpower or a series of related superpowers. I have also written essence meta stories, and I'm better at advancing time in those than I am in jump chains because there's no like cosmic time limit. There's no, oh, you have to be here for 10 years or you have to be here for a year. You could just go to a different place if you have the right essence and you could just travel. And I think that's really cool. Yeah, we've been talking about this for an hour, and this has absolutely not been a focus stream, but it's been very fun. I do think that we're going to start to wrap this up. One of the things that I want to talk about before we leave is the concept of alt forms, which is a very, very important concept to a lot of different jump chain people. Because if you want to get super into like the reads, if you want to be like a Kryptonian, or if you want to be like a speedster, or a mutant's probably a better example, then you are really going to want to understand alt forms. An alt form is a form that you get as a consequence of being in a jump that different people will talk about very differently. But broadly speaking, in strict theory, every jump should get you an alt form. It's just that most people will consistently carry their bodies if their bodies are one species. So if you jump from one setting as a human to another setting as a human, you'll typically keep some aspects of your form. Your age might differ, and in fact, in most jumps, your age is supposed to be up to dice rolls, or you're supposed to pay to keep your age or to determine your age specifically. But most of the time, a lot of jumps will offer you an age range to pick. And you will have to do a dice roll if you don't want to spend points to determine your age. You could go from one jump where you're a child. In fact, there's a generic childhood jump that is fairly popular, and it's a very fun, very weird jump where you are going to be like a toddler, a young child, and maybe a teen before you leave. And then there's also other jumps where you are cosmic beings and you are unknowably old, just ridiculously super ancient. And of course, that's a silly concept, but like that's the way that it goes in a lot of different jumps. Most jumps will have you be like, oh, my origin is I'm a teacher. I'm going to be a sensible age to be a teacher. So I'm going to have to roll this dice, and my age will be 18 plus D plus 1d8. Something like this will be the way that it is for age. But for alt forms, the way that I personally rule it is that if my jumper is a human and has the ability to transform into an orc, that is a different alt form. But if they're a human in one setting, that will be their human body in other settings. Unless like there's like a gender change, which is something that a lot of jumps offer. As a non-binary person, I really like that. I really like that like gender and stuff is like up to that kind of thing. But like the way that I rule it also depends on the kind of creature. For instance, my alt forms for vampires and for werewolves, I'll tend to have like the human based form, and then there'll be like slight aesthetic changes for my vampire form if I go to Lords of the Night, which is a popular series of supernatural jumps based off of D&D's either 3rd edition or 3.5 edition that are for vampires, zombies, and liches. And they offer you different origins based off of the type of creature you are, based off of the type of jump. So Lord of the Night Vampires has the Black Bloods, which is just standard super vampire. It does normal vampiric shit, but it's like supercharged. It's very good at being a vampire. Ash Bloods, which are spooky eldritch vampires that are very, very hard to kill. There's the Lost, which are angel vampires that aren't really vampires, but they're vampire like. There's the fire vampires, which are vampires, but they're immune to fire, and also they like burning stuff, that kind of thing. And the way that that will work is usually I'll be like, my character is a human, but if they shift into their vampire alt form, they're still themselves physically, but they gain the properties and weaknesses of whatever vampire they are. Same thing with a werewolf. I do this with human adjacent species slash mostly species that like start off as human and then become something else. Like in most cosmologies and in most settings, being a werewolf can be a genetic condition. You can be born a werewolf, but lots of people are werewolves because they become werewolves. And it's the same thing with vampires. That's the way that I do alt forms, but in theory, a lot of people do the idea that like, oh, every jump I get an alt form for. There is like a generic bear jump, which is a popular semi jump joke jump by a person over in one of the communities where you get to be a bear for a decade. I think that's really fun. You just get to be a bear and do bear things. There's also a gauntlet, which is called generic dinosaur, where you get to be a dinosaur. I've seen a gauntlet form of that. I actually don't know if that's a gauntlet. Um, oh, oh, wait a minute. I can't believe Grimm's mentioned generic bear, and I actually didn't see that comment. Damn it. I really like generic bear. It's a very fun jump. There's also like a generic ferrets jump, which is a parody of generic bear that follows the same basic rules and stuff. And it's worth noting that in those sorts of jumps, unless you take a drawback that locks you into that form, you can change. If you want to start off the jump as a bear, you're a bear at the beginning of the jump. You're a bear when you load into the jump, but you can change into your human form. I don't know if that's how it works for generic bears specifically. I actually haven't read that one, but I'm using that as like an example. That's one of the fun things about generic creepypasta. It's true that generic creepypasta has a cryptid origin, which is the monster origin. If you want to be the thing that bumps in the night, you can design a monstrous form for yourself for free if you take that origin, and that is your body as a cryptid. But if you don't want to be that eldritch horror, that creepy little creeper, you can transform into your human form, and you can just go and walk around and stuff. And I think that's really cool. That's one of the things that I really, really, really like about jump chains. But it's also one of the ways that like a jump chain can snowball if you go to the right settings and you have the right attitude. There's also jumps that are very prominent for alt form heavy people. Generic werewolf has perks that let you mix and match the abilities of different forms and lets you use abilities and perks that are unique to alt forms in any form. So it is a jump that I highly recommend extremely early on. I would recommend that someone take it as maybe their second or third fantasy jump, because if you go to a jump where it's like, oh, you're an elf and you have elf stuff now, you're only going to have elf stuff, at least like super specific to elf stuff, when you're in your elf alt form. But if you take the right perks from generic werewolf, you don't have to worry about that. You can be an elf in any way, shape, or form. You want to be a dragon and also have the cool stuff from being an elf? You got it. Um, little stuff like that. In the future, I fully plan on talking very specifically about like specific jumps, and I'll be finding some way to share my screen or whatever to highlight different jumps, and we'll go through a jump and we'll talk about it together. But now that we're approaching an hour and a half, I am going to log off because my voice is starting to hurt. But I've had so much fun. I'm so excited that new friends are here. And if you like Jumpchains, I hope that you think that we had fun here and you'd like to stick around in the future because I'm absolutely going to be talking about them more. But until then, bye everyone. I appreciate you and I hope that we get to talk soon. If you like me and you want to support me, it's important to note that it's really difficult for me to do work, regular, non streaming, non online work. So I'm always accepting donations and stuff like that. I'm also I'm a very active content creator. So if you like the stuff I create, consider throwing me a few dollars. I'm not going to like beg for it, but if you want to help me, you definitely can. But bye everyone.